Hello and welcome. Sadly, I'm not going to have time to be able to do the complete R2D2 texture tutorial to show you guys how to do it in its entirety because I like sleeping. So instead of that, I'm going to go ahead and do the next best thing and I'm going to show you how to build physical and 3D looking details within Photoshop for 2D flat mapping style. So what I'm going to do, instead of texturing R2D2 over here, I'm going to go ahead and choose different elements and build them in 3D so you can in Photoshop, so you can have an idea how you can fake and actually paint textures that look like 3D. So let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to pick a section of his faceplate right here. This little section, let's go ahead and do this in 2D so we can give you an idea of how it works. So the first thing first is we're going to have a section where we're going to do it all. So we're going to do it in this level called the eye, and I'm going to create a brand new layer. We call it the base. And then within the base, that's going to go ahead and choose my blue color. So I'm going to go ahead with my eyedrop, grab my blue color, and I'm going to fill it in completely. What I'm going to do next is something called adding a mask. I'm going to go ahead and add the mask right over here to the base. And then I'm going to do Control I so you can hide it. So why am I going to be working in masks? One, masks are a very efficient way of being able to change detail in a texture in a very quick and efficient manner. So for example, if I have an AK-47, I'm going to go ahead and mask the wooden color. I'm going to go ahead and mask all the metal. I'm going to go ahead and mask all the whatever different elements are on the texture itself. So if I want to go ahead and, for example, and change the color of the wood, since I have it masked out, I can just quickly drop it into that layer, a new color, change the regular steel from a gray to a gold. And by using mask, I will be able to quickly shift around colors and have new assets. So it's a lot to explain, but I'll go ahead through the process here and you'll get an idea of what you need to do. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build the shape of that little square piece right in the center. So we're going to zoom in, and I'm going to go ahead and make a selection more or less in the shape of it. Yes. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill it with white. And there you go. Now I have the shape of it. Next thing I want to do is I want to create a drop shadow, a very, very subtle drop shadow on that shape to give it a look of appearance of 3D. So with the selection on, I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new layer. And that layer right here where it says normal, I'm going to go ahead and make that to multiply. And after you make it a multiply, what I'm going to do is take white, because white is what we're going to use to form the basis of the drop shadow using an effect. So we're going to go ahead and get completely white. I am going to paint bucket, and as you can see, nothing happens because it's when you use a white color on a multiply, you're not going to see anything. However, when the magic really starts to come is when I go here to FX, and then I put one called outer glow. So right now you can't see the outer glow because it's set to screen. So what I'm going to do to make it to be into a shadow, I'm going to go ahead and make it into multiply. And then of course, since it's set to white, you can't see the effect. So if you see when I turn it to gray, and then I take the opacity and raise it, let's go ahead and choose a gray, kind of a dark one just to start out with, and then we'll adjust it. And then you can see the opacity here based on what I raise it to, it increases the darkness of the shadow. So as you can see, since it's an outer effect, it has that appearance of having a shadow. It's consistent, doesn't look like brush strokes, it looks very clean. So what I'm going to do there, I'm going to take a slightly bit closer into the body. So I'm going to take to the size and start to reduce it. And then lower the opacity. When I deselect, as you can see, I have a very slight subtle shadow around it. So that's going to be the drop shadow from the extrusion. Now we're going to do an inner shadow using the same trick, but for the inside. So I'm going to click Control on that layer because I have a selection, and let's go ahead and call this outer shadow. And then create a new layer and call it inner shadow. So when I go ahead and create the layer called inner shadow, again, we're going to take that, make it to multiply. You're going to go right here, white, paint bucket it again. You're going to go to effects, and you're going to do inner glow because now it's going to be the inside of the shadow. So this time, as you can see on the R2D2, that darkness has a hint of that blue to that color that R2D2 has. So we're going to go ahead and choose the color to be a little bit gray bluish. And then we're going to go ahead and turn it into multiply. As you can see, maybe it could be a little bit more saturated. Such. A little bit darker. And then size-wise, we're going to go ahead and pull it in a little bit. And as you can see now, we have a little bit of inner shadow, which gives it a little bit of more of a thickness. So what's going to be the next thing to give this an appearance of an actual being a 3D shape? So the next, we're going to fake a tiny bit of lighting on the top of it to imply that lighting is coming from the top of this model to the bottom, giving it a slight highlight. So then, let's see. So then what I'm going to do after that, I'm going to create a brand new layer. Call the layer the highlight. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick the blue here, the color, and I'm going to take it and change the value a little bit closer to white. Not completely white, but enough where there's a bit of a contrast. So I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint bucket that entirely. And then after I do that, add a mask. Control I. So now it's set so I could be able to draw with this. So what am I going to do then? I'm going to take a selection so I have a guideline to work with. And then I'm going to pick a brush, and you got to excuse me, I don't have my Wacom tablet. It's somewhere else right now where it's unavailable. I can't do the size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint that highlight on top very, very subtly. So take the size now about, say 4. Nah, let's say 3. 3. And then I'm going to come across the surface and go with Shift. Put a line at this surface on this side. Go on the other side and Shift as well. And then if I go to the smudge tool, if I create the smudge tool, if you hold Shift while you hold the smudge tool, you go in a straight line. And I'm going to go ahead and drag that and sort of simulate. Like there's been a slight bit of fade in the color. If I want a little bit more detail towards the center, I'll add one more highlight, paint that along the surface, and then I'll get the smudge again, smudge it to the left, smudge it to the right. And as you can see, now I have the appearance of some sort of lighting. So let's say I want to do a little bit to the side to imply that there is a fading from top to the bottom. So put a tiny bit here, tiny bit here, and then I'm going to take the smudge again, and then lower that. So now as you can see, I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and now you can see there's a tiny bit of fake light data. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this blue material here, and I'm going to add a different darker tone of blue to improve the sort of deep metal feeling to it. So what I'm going to do is create a brand new layer. I'm going to deselect. I'm going to go to eyedrop. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn that to the more darker tone of blue. Deselect again. Drop it into the whole scene. Control I. After I add the mask, call this dark blue. And then when you hold Control and you click on one of the areas where you have a selection, there you go. I now have selection of my item. Then I'm going to go ahead and get a brush that's going to be very soft. And we're going to have another lesson when it comes to creating your own brushes. So, but right now I'll use the default ones to kind of paint a picture. I will scale this down to, what's a good size? Kind of huge size, because it's going to have to cover a huge portion of it. And then I'm going to the top. And let's go ahead and start at 20% so we could have a nice kind of, or you know what, 50% so we can have a nice gradient effect to it. So I'm going to go along the edges, hold Shift. Scroll down, hold Shift, scroll down, and then I'm going to scale the size of this brush a little bit smaller because I'm going to do the second pass. And again, I'm going to stick to right here to the corners. Hold Shift, 50% now. As you can see, that 50% now is now building the value to 100% in the color, so it has that sort of deep gradient right there. And then the last bit of this metal that I'm going to do to give it a little bit of a metallic, or second to last. Now I'm going to create a new layer. And as you can see, you're going to need a lot of layers. I'm going to name this light blue. And then for this one, I'm going to take the bottom layer, as it was before, and I'm going to go ahead and paint bucket that, or eyedrop. And I'm going to get a color that's slightly lighter in value. I'm going to fill it into the whole layer, color mask, control invert, hit control and select another part of the texture, and then with the brush at about 50%, maybe a bit, let's see, 37, let's say 42, just go right down towards the center and paint one line and scale it a tiny bit, let's say 32, say 22. Go right down the center and paint one more, which is a little subtle. Now when you zoom out, you can see that panel has a little bit of a gradient to it. It's sort of like that metal that you have. If you want to go an extra step above, you could, for example, go to one of the corners right up here, and again take that maybe even a brighter color. So let's go ahead, just for shits and giggles, try that out. Slightly brighter color. Get a brush size that's slightly bigger, a little bit bigger than that, and kind of give it an additional tone right there, sort of to imply that the light is coming from that direction, and at that particular moment the gleam is there. So I think it needs one tiny bit more step just to make it, to kind of give it that full 3D effect. And I think that's going to be, again, we're going to use another layer effect. So let's say under the inner shadow, we're going to create one more. Another layer, call it darker shadow. Turn that to completely white. Make it to multiply. Then paint bucket it in. And as you can see, nothing happens until you actually go and do the effect. And then I go do effects, inner glow, but this one right here is going to have a slightly thicker cut to it to kind of imply a hard surface. So let's see, is it this direction? Yeah, as you can see now, if I raise the choke up, it's going to make the line darker. And then when I take the size and reduce it, now it gives me the first basis of one of those panels that you're going to see on the side of R2D2. Let's see, I think it needs one more color, and this, of course, you have to judge yourself how many layers of this it needs. So let's go ahead and take right above this one, new layer, select, deselect, select the darker value of that, take a little slightly bit darker color again, paint bucket, nope, sorry, wrong layer, darkest blue, and then you paint bucket again. Create a mask, control I, not there, click on somewhere where you have a selection, control there, so you can get the shape of it, and then right here again, same idea, smaller brush on the outer parts of this, so it's a little bit darker, and then I always like to use corners, for example, like this as a good guide point, so then I take that, and kind of do a little curve around here, very subtle. But as you can see now we have a panel that has a slight bit of that reflective sheen to it. So I'm going to hold Control S, and that's going to be the first part of the panel that I'm going to show you in this video. And the next one, we're going to do the little red eye inside of it.